In January of 1999, security officers at the most secretive intelligence agency in the United States pulled a small, fuzzy, wide-eyed toy off an employee's desk and confiscated it like it was a listening device. Because that is exactly what they thought it was. The agency was the National Security Agency. The toy was a Furby. And for a few strange weeks, one of the most powerful surveillance organizations on Earth was more afraid of a $35 Christmas present than almost anything else on its own property. Here is the question worth asking. Not whether a talking toy could actually spy on the National Security Agency. It could not, and within days, even the agency's own officials seemed to sense that. The real question is how a plastic and fake fur owl convinced grown adults trained to detect real threats that it might be listening. That question has very little to do with spycraft, and everything to do with how well this toy was built to fake being alive. The story starts 2 years earlier, with two inventors named Dave Hampton and Caleb Chung. Hampton had spent years building animatronics and novelty electronics, the kind of small mechanical creatures that move and react just convincingly enough to surprise someone holding them. Chung brought a background in puppetry and film special effects, the discipline of making something lifeless read as alive through nothing but timing and motion. Together, the two of them spent 9 months designing the toy on paper and another 9 months actually building it, chasing one very specific goal. They did not just want a toy that talked. They wanted a toy that felt like it was discovering the world in real time, right in front of the person holding it, blinking and reacting a half second after you did something, the same way a real animal would. They partnered with a toy inventor named Richard Levy, who brought the concept to a company called Tiger Electronics. Tiger's leader, Roger Schiffman, bought the rights and unveiled the toy at the American International Toy Fair in New York in early 1998. The response from buyers in the room was immediate. This was not a normal-looking gadget on a shelf full of normal-looking gadgets. It had huge blinking eyes, oversized ears that swiveled and folded, and a beak that opened and closed every time it spoke its own invented language. Buyers who had seen thousands of toy pitches over their careers reportedly stopped to watch this one longer than they meant to. The toy launched to the public on October 2, 1998, priced at around $35. And then something happened that Tiger Electronics had not fully prepared for, despite the strong reaction at the toy fair months earlier. Demand did not just meet expectations. It broke them completely, the same way a handful of other toy crazes had blindsided manufacturers earlier that same decade. In its first partial year on shelves, the company sold 1.8 million units. By the following year, that number jumped to 14 million. Over its first 3 years of production, more than 40 million of these toys sold worldwide. During the 1998 holiday season specifically, parents could not find them anywhere near the original price. Stores limited customers to one per visit. Local news programs ran segments on which stores had a truck arriving that morning. Resale prices climbed past $100, and in the most desperate cases, buyers reported paying several $100s to secondhand sellers just to have one sitting under the tree on Christmas morning. Part of what made the toy so addictive for kids and adults alike was its core trick. Out of the box, it spoke almost entirely in its own made-up language, a string of nonsense syllables somewhere between baby talk and a foreign tongue. Owners actually began compiling informal dictionaries of these words, trading translations with each other the way people once traded notes on a foreign language learned on a family trip. But over time, as a child interacted with it, English words gradually started replacing the gibberish, one phrase at a time. It genuinely seemed to be learning how to talk, the same way a small child does, listening, absorbing, and slowly getting better at speaking back. Owners swore their own toy had a personality, a mood, even a sense of humor, despite every unit on the assembly line running the identical program underneath the fur. That illusion was the entire product. It was clever, it was effective, and it was about to cause a problem nobody at the toy company saw coming. By January of 1999, just over 3 months after launch, that same illusion reached the National Security Agency, headquartered in Fort Meade, Maryland. On January 13th, the agency issued an order banning the toys from its buildings entirely. The Navy's shipyard in Portsmouth, Virginia, followed with a similar restriction of its own. Separately, the Federal Aviation Administration weighed in as well, treating the toy the same way it treated any other battery-powered electronic device, something that had to be switched off during takeoff and landing rather than left running in a passenger's bag. 3 different arms of the federal government, in other words, all decided independently that this specific toy deserved a written policy. At the National Security Agency, the reasoning was strikingly literal. Photography and audio recording devices of any kind are strictly forbidden inside the agency's facilities. And because this toy appeared to learn new words from whatever it heard around it, officials worried it might be doing exactly that. Quietly recording snippets of classified conversations somewhere inside its plastic shell and repeating them back later in its high-pitched voice, in a hallway or a parking lot far from where the words were first spoken. It sounds almost funny in hindsight, and at the time, it was treated as a serious enough concern that offices were told to remove the toys immediately, no exceptions and no debate, the same way anyone would be told to remove an actual recording device found sitting on a desk inside a classified building. Tiger Electronics moved quickly to shut the story down before it grew any further. Roger Schiffman told reporters directly that the toy had, in his words, absolutely no ability to do any recording whatsoever. Dave Hampton, one of the original inventors, went further, demonstrating publicly that the toy's built-in microphone was only sensitive enough to detect simple sound patterns, monotonous beeps and claps, nothing close to capturing and later replaying full sentences of human speech. The truth was almost anticlimactic compared to the fear it caused. Inside every one of these toys sat a simple processor paired with a basic speech synthesis chip, no more sophisticated than what powered other talking toys of that same era. The kind of components a hobbyist could take apart on a kitchen table in an afternoon. The vocabulary was not learned from the environment at all. It was hard-coded from the very start, programmed to gradually swap out the made-up language for English on a fixed internal schedule, regardless of what anyone actually said to it or whether anyone spoke to it at all. The toy was not listening and adapting the way a person or even a real recording device would. It was running a script it had been given the day it left the factory, and simply revealing more of that script the longer it stayed powered on. Faced with the manufacturer's public denials and a fairly simple explanation of the hardware sitting inside a $35 toy, the ban did not last long. The National Security Agency quietly walked it back rather than run a full technical teardown to prove what was already fairly obvious to anyone who opened one up. For a brief moment, a mass-market Christmas toy had outmaneuvered one of the most secretive government agencies in the country, not through any actual capability hidden inside it, but purely through how convincingly it pretended to have one. The mania that made this story possible eventually cooled the way every toy craze does. Production of the original version wound down by around 2002, after that run of more than 40 million units sold worldwide. But this was not the end of the toy's story, only the end of its first act. In 2005, Hasbro, which had acquired Tiger Electronics along the way, brought the toy back with new, more expressive features. Another version arrived in 2012 with animated screen eyes instead of the old mechanical ones. A more connected version followed in 2016, able to link to a smartphone app. And in 2023, a 5th-generation model launched with voice activation and more than 600 built-in responses. By 2025, the toy had become a finalist for the National Toy Hall of Fame, more than a quarter century after it first frightened a spy agency into writing a memo about it. So what actually happened in that strange month in early 1999? Nobody built a working listening device disguised as a children's toy. What actually happened is that 2 inventors built something so convincingly alive that it fooled the exact people whose entire job was not to be fooled. The National Security Agency spends its existence trying to tell real signals from noise, real threats from harmless ones. And for a few weeks, A toy powered by a chip simpler than a pocket calculator managed to look like a signal worth taking seriously at the highest levels of American intelligence. That is the part of this story that outlasts the joke. The toy never needed a microphone that actually worked. It only needed to seem like it might, and to seem like it was getting smarter every day you spent with it. Decades before anyone worried about a smart speaker listening in the next room, or a phone that seemed to know what you were about to search for before you typed it, a fuzzy plastic owl with blinking eyes had already taught an entire country, including its most guarded agency, the same lesson those later devices would teach all over again. Something does not have to actually understand you to make you believe, completely, that it does. The National Security Agency eventually got its building back to normal, and Furby went on to sell tens of millions more units under a company that never once needed to prove the toy was actually listening. It only ever needed everyone to wonder.